Video number 21. So again, if you haven't checked, make sure you check all the previous ones because this is leading up from all the basics. And today's topic is physical and cognitive effects of modern days technology. And we are talking a lot about basic things that everyone should be doing, how it impacts your health, what screenings they should be doing. And we talk very little about nutrition, just because today is probably going to make more sense that these things need to be taken care of first before you tap into minuscule things like that. So can you go straight in and just explain what are the most common physical and cognitive effects of modern days technology use? What are benefits? What are negative effects? Is there any at all, or is it blown out of proportion? You know, when 5G got installed and everyone was like showing these videos all over the place, birds are dying and this and that, but obviously over exaggeration, but something is happening. So what is actually happening? Is it good? Is it bad? Is it something we just should be ignoring? And also maybe talk about some real life experiences. What have you seen? And more importantly, what interests me personally, can it be seen on blood tests?
Right. So first off, we'll go ahead and get started with what is what's called non-native EMF, which is electromagnetic fields. And that can be produced by any electrical device, but the ones that are the biggest culprits are going to be wireless communication devices. Now, the obvious benefit of them is that you can be anywhere and have access to the internet. That's a benefit, right? I'm not gonna, it's the reason why we're doing this right now, right? There is no way that we would be able to do these podcasts and Zoom calls and stuff like that and work remotely without it. So there's obvious social, financial type of reasons why it's a benefit. But almost everybody that I meet never thinks twice about, is there a drawback to using technology like this? And that's where, in fact, there is, specifically wireless technology, because wireless technology is not kept in a container. For example, everybody, if you're, grew up in the 90s and 2000s, the internet was this cord you plugged in and it made a bunch of noise and you had to sit there in front of the computer for 10 minutes to go anywhere, right? Eventually got a lot better, but still wireless technology wasn't very good. You couldn't use a laptop very well. You had to do it with a desktop. That was actually better technology, and the reason is because it was on a wire. In other words, all the information and electricity is being transported through a wire, and it only interacts with the things you want it to interact with. Wireless technology is the exact opposite. It wants to interact with everything, right? When you step into, if you have an iPhone, when you step into another room with a whole bunch of other iPhones, what does it want to do? It wants to connect with every other iPhone in there and stuff like that. You can send each other, you see what I'm saying? Like, automatically it wants to connect with everything, and so it's sending wireless frequencies, which are light. Every frequency that you can that is in the air is a form of light. We may not be able to see it, right? We talked a little bit about infrared lighting or red light therapy and stuff like that. It's the same concept. The infrared light from those therapy boxes, you can't physically see. It doesn't mean it's not having an impact on your body. But if you just turned on just the infrared sensors of those lights, it would look like nothing was coming out of it. But you could clearly put it next to your body and you would sense the infrared heat interacting with your skin. Wi-Fi, cell phone towers, cell phones, radio towers, radar towers, like if you live near an airport and things of that nature. All of those are a light frequency that's interacting with everything that it touches, including our body, right? And it's not really that hard to grasp that it is in fact doing something. We'll talk a little bit on what it's doing, but just as a little quick analogy, the sun is obviously interacting with our skin and our eyes and causes certain biological things to go on. We've talked about this before with your circadian rhythm and training it, the reason why we get outside, those types of things. So it's not that far-fetched to think, oh, well, this wireless technology is obviously touching and interacting with my skin and my eyes and probably penetrating a little bit into it. What is it doing, right? And we do have some data, specifically um, with blue light. And when I say blue light in a synthetic format only comes from LED light bulbs, CFL light bulbs, and fluorescent light bulbs. It is a form of non-native electromagnetic field. We have data on blue light specifically raising blood sugar without eating anything. Okay, so just a blue light from an LED bulb can raise your blood sugar without you eating anything. Just grasp that. If you happen to live indoors every day and all your lights are on every day, you're inadvertently raising your blood sugar without eating anything, no matter what you ate. Now, that blood sugar elevation is minor, but if you do it every day, what does that really amount to? It's almost like you're eating every day more than you should without you having to eat anything, which is why sometimes you find people that are perfectly fit looking, but they have type 2 diabetes.
Hmm. I see it a
It's
lot, to
one
be
of
honest.
those,
I see it very a lot, more
yeah,
frequently lately.
yeah. It's a new, I wouldn't say it's a new phenomenon, but it's more frequent, right? It's more of like, ooh, this is strange. Why has this person got type 2 diabetes or markers of type 2 diabetes when they clearly are of good weight and they are active, but for some reason they're displaying these signs. And then you more than likely find out that they work indoors all the time or that they work in a technology field, like they're a programmer or a computer expert. So they're literally inundated with Wi-Fi signaling, cell phone signaling, literally every single minute of their day. And then, so that's one quick thing that you can start to kind of look into as far as blood work is predominantly raised or raised more than it should be for that particular person, their insulin level, their fasted insulin level. So their blood sugar will tend to be normal, but their fasted insulin level is way higher than you normally see. And then you start to see over time their A1C, if it's not already up to the top, it's very close to the top of the range. And then you're like, a year or two more of this, and they probably will be pre-diabetic, if not already diabetic. So that's one of the things that you'll start to see displayed with people that are exposed to non-native electromagnetic fields frequently. Other things that you can see in blood work. The easiest analogy to think about this is what you mentioned earlier, which is they're literally being microwaved. Wi-Fi and those types of things are measured with a device called a frequency meter, and they're measured in the format of microwatts per meter squared. So the easiest analogy that everybody's really familiar with is a microwave, right? Everybody has one in their home. They heat their food with it. If you have a 1,000 watt microwave, that's a pretty damn good microwave. You can pretty much cook anything in it. They happen to be, if you measure the area inside of it, the volume inside of it, it happens to be about half a meter, okay, uh, squared. So if you double the amount of volume in there, that microwave would have 500 watts per meter squared of power in it, okay? These devices pick up microwatts per meter squared. And I've done a lot of testing, and I'll get into a little bit of my personal journey with it. But if you stand about 3 feet away from a microwave, you're going to get about 20,000 microwatts that are going to be hitting your body. That's if you're standing, your microwave is on and you're sitting about 3 feet away. That is obviously, if you just told somebody, you didn't tell them any of these numbers, and you just said, hey, I want you to turn on the microwave for 24 hours, and I want you to sit next to it for about 3 feet, and then ask them, do you think that's safe for you? Do you think that's okay? And most people intuitively would be like, probably not. It's probably not a good idea to be staring at your microwave or be close enough to your microwave to be getting radiated by it, especially for 24 hours, right? Like that's kind of common sense, even if they didn't know anything about what I just said. Well, I will tell you, modern day Wi-Fi routers, if you're standing about 10 to 12 feet away from them, they're anywhere from 12,000 microwatts to 22,000 microwatts.
Oh, wow.
Okay. Okay. So now you go, okay, so my router is giving off the same amount of microwatts. Okay. So what does that mean? It means exactly what a microwave means. Okay. If you took a steak and you just put it inside the microwave, even if you put it on defrost, if you left it in there for an hour or two, what do you think is going to happen to that steak? It's going to be dehydrated. It's
Hmm.
going to, like all the water is going to get boiled out of it. It's going to vibrate enough that it boils out. And again, that's inside the microwave. If you turned it all the way to defrost, which is the lowest setting of power in a microwave, in a couple hours, it's going to be dehydrated. Do you think it would still happen if you turned it, if you could turn it all the way down to, 20,000 microwatts? The answer is probably so. If you gave it enough time, it's probably going to get dehydrated sooner than if you left the steak outside the microwave.
Hmm.
That's exactly what's going on to people in their blood work. You can see that their blood work is showing signs. Most doctors just interpret this as dehydration. And most doctors will say, oh, you know what? Maybe we should just give you some IV fluids for a week or two and then come back and get tested. And sure enough, the markers improve. But I'm like, well, did you improve the symptom or did you improve the underlying cause? Okay.
Hmm.
And it doesn't take a rocket science to understand that, hey, if that patient came back in 3 months later, they would still show signs of dehydration if they haven't fixed their environment.
So
That's what
for
you're getting.
someone who is going to GPs, I see this a lot, and GP just tells them, "Hey, no, this is great." What specific markers should they be looking at as a reference
Yeah.
point to,
So
let's say, point A, and then 3 months later down the line?
yeah. So your BUN and creatinine ratios. So BUN is also in Europe. I think it's called urea.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah,
So in America and Canada, it's called BUN or blood urea nitrogen. And that basically is literally telling us the the urea component of mitochondria in the urea cycle of your liver. Okay. So that is telling you that your tissues are being damaged enough. Now, urea can be raised, right? It's not like a cut and dry thing. It can be
yeah.
raised by training, right? If you're training really hard and you're damaging a lot of proteins, urea will be raised. But it shouldn't be raised all the time, right? It should go up and down with your training. But what happens when your urea, your blood nitrogen urea, gets pegged and goes higher and higher and higher? Even though you're training, you're almost kind of not feeling very well anyway, and you're not training very well. Um, and that's the prime sign of like, oh, you're getting more and more cellular damage that can't be recycled, so it's being pushed out as urea. So urea nitrogen goes up and creatinine stays steady. If they both go up, then you're looking into potential that's more correlated with training because creatinine will go up with really hard training. The third leg on the stool is EGFR, calculated. Um, Calculated EGFR will just basically mirror creatinine. So if all three of them go up, the first two and then EGFR will go down. So EGFR, if it goes down, that means dehydration. If BUN goes up, that means dehydration. If creatinine goes up, that means dehydration slash the kidneys may or may not be working correctly. But so they haven't developed a test specifically for measuring the cellular hydration, but this is the best we can do. And
Mm.
that's what you see. And you just see dehydration markers that just don't add up for the person. Like sometimes I see these dehydration markers and the person's not even trained, right?
Yeah, yeah,
And I'm like, well, how much water are you drinking? And then the next thing, here's the clue. The next thing they answer when I ask them how much they're drinking, they're like, I drink a lot of water. They're like, lately, for the last year or 6 months, I feel like I can't drink enough water. They're
Mm.
like, they're like, I'm drinking 180 ounces, 200 ounces. And they literally are like, I just can't drink enough water. And that's the clue. They're showing signs of dehydration, but yet they are hydrating to the max and probably more than they've ever had before, uh, orally, right? And this is why it's basically the telltale sign. You're getting dehydrated internally, just like the steak is inside the microwave. right?
Yeah.
You're literally being interacted with and being dehydrated at the cellular tissue level, not at the oral route and then dispersing through your organs and coming out. That's still doing what it's supposed to be doing, but that's not a system that's very fast. Everybody, we've talked about this before, where mitochondria play a crucial role in making water at the cellular level. That's what's being interrupted. Cellular hydration is being blunted in two ways. The mitochondria is an electrical engine inside every cell, and there's hundreds of them. If it's an electrical engine and there's an electrical foreign signal interacting with it, it's not going to perform very well. So it makes less cellular water. And the physics mechanism of what we just talked about with the particles vibrating a little bit, that will dehydrate the cell membrane. So you're dehydrating the cell membrane and you're making it harder for the mitochondria to make intracellular water. So you're dehydrating the cell from two different formats just by exposing yourself to this level of microwatts. That can lead to irritability, that can lead to brain fog, that can lead to tinnitus, especially if you're somebody who wears wireless headphones a lot. That can lead to other things, like if this has progressed for long enough, what it'll lead is what's called pregnenolone still syndrome, because in every evolutionary paradigm that your biology has ever been exposed to, going back as long as you can think, raising metabolic rate is always the answer. If you're cold, we raise metabolic rate. If you're sick, we want to raise metabolic rate so that the immune system has enough gumph to fight off whatever it's fighting off. If you're starving, we raise metabolic rate. Why? Because we want your ass to move and get somewhere where there is food, right? Like, this is your body thinking. The answer is always raise metabolic rate. So that's any kind of a stressor, including this dehydration stressor. It doesn't understand that this is a new phenomenon. It just understands, hey, we're under stress. What's the answer? Raise metabolic rate. So what does it do? It raises cortisol production. That's like the first hormone that's going to be raised to raise metabolic rate and all its downstream cascades. When it does that, that's great. But what happens? Your stress that's stressing the body never goes away. So your body continues to raise cortisol, continues to raise cortisol. What ends up happening? It steals pregnenolone to make cortisol. And pregnenolone is the base hormone for all your sex hormones. So your sex hormone panel starts to drop. So you have high cortisol and really low DHEA, really low progesterone are like the first ones. In women, that's going to be like really obvious. In men, it takes a little while because men also make direct testosterone. So their testosterone is not just coming from DHEA, but that you will see their DHEA markers go down. You'll see their DHEA markers be subpar. And so those are other things that you're going to see in blood work if somebody's been chronically exposed to this. And they might not even really know. They just feel not very good, right? And that is one of the reasons why.
Yeah, we probably both see this very often. And I just recently discussed with one of the guys about testosterone and how it declines through the years and whatnot. And I asked him, yeah, it does, but all the studies are done in modern cities. I would like to see if it's declining in someone who's lived in Siberia for 50 years. Is that even
well? So yeah, no, I have somebody. Okay, so and this will lead into a little bit more what we're going to talk about, who lives in a city, but his home is set up to mitigate EFM disruption, and he does quite a lot of the things, in fact, almost by verbatim, the things that we've been talking about getting outside, getting some cold exposure. He does that every single day. He wears the blue light blocking glasses at night. He's been doing this for 3 years. He's 47 years old, and he has a nanogram per deciliter testosterone number of 900. Okay, so yeah.
Everyone would want that.
Yeah, I mean, I literally had to ask him. I'm like, I'm not sure I believe this testosterone number. You're sure you're not taking TRT? And he goes, no, I'm not. I'm not taking TRT. And so then I started asking him, quizzing him, and this is what this guy is doing. Everything that we've talked about up until this point, he's just doing it without even knowing that he was doing it correctly. He just was like, this makes sense to me. It makes me feel good. I'm going to do it. And he's been doing it for a couple of years, and this is what his sex hormone panel looks like. And I was like, wow, you're doing a great job. And then we discussed some of the things that we're going to discuss today of like, how can he improve it even better? And he was doing some of the things correctly. And some of the things he's like, oh, I'm going to start doing that now. And so we'll go over that a little bit.
So
You
when
know,
we
the,
go through all
oh,
that, what I would like to know also is what are effects on the sleep, sleep quality, and all those kind of
oh
things.
yeah,
Because hey,
yes.
you have a Wi-Fi at home, it's going to work 24/7. What can you do with that?
Right, right. So yes, with sleep, yeah, if you're leaving your Wi-Fi on all night, you're definitely going to affect your sleep. How is it going to affect your sleep? For one, you're going to still continue to get this dehydration effect. So in other words, the stressor, so when you go to sleep, that's when your body should be the least stressed, period. There shouldn't be much stress interacting with it. That's the whole point of sleep. All your stresses happen during the day. When you go to sleep, you regenerate all that stress, whether it was brain stress or physical stress or tendon ligament stress, things of that nature. Um, so if you have electromagnetic fields in your house, specifically in the area that you sleep, how is that going to impact it? It's going to make it way harder for your body to recover. You're going to see that displayed anywhere from REM sleep being almost non-existent. Okay. I've seen people with like their REM sleep numbers of like 30 minutes. So they sleep 8 hours and they only get 30 minutes of REM sleep. I'm like, wow, that I don't really see that very often, but
Mm.
that's what is one of the things that happens. What do we start doing? We start turning off the Wi-Fi, and next thing you know, their REM sleep jumps up from 30 minutes to an hour almost within a week or two. That's not a coincidence. Okay.
So this is bringing
And
me to also that someone who is at home could experiment with this and start tracking their
absolutely.
data on their Oura rings, Whoop bands, and whatnot, and see if it makes difference without even buying any advanced technology.
And we'll get into a little bit of mitigation strategies on like this is really really low tech experimentation. Like
Mm.
the tech that we're turning off is the most expensive. That's the most technologically that's the most technologically advanced stuff that we're going to deal with when it comes to mitigating EMF, other than maybe a meter, right? um, that's for quantitative purposes.
So
And then
also
the
with
other thing,
sleep, let's say
yeah.
someone lives very close to hospital where you have a lot of really heavy machinery to test people and whatnot. Would that
Mhm.
have effect as well?
Probably, I mean, yes, because not so much because of the machinery, because most of those rooms are actually coded. So in other words, they have specific materials in the walls and stuff to not let that out, like MRI machines and stuff like that. But the hospital is wired all with Wi-Fi repeaters, right? So if you live really close to this, you could be more interference. Where I see the most interference, airports. If you live next to an airport, they have a radar tower,
Mm.
and that radar tower is very powerful. Okay, and they also have other radio communications that are very powerful. So the most like industrial type of building that I see affects people the most in this particular realm is actually airports, because they also run a full 5G node out of the airport. So not only is it a lot of electromagnetic field activity, it's also the highest powered activity, right? Which goes back to kind of what you mentioned about birds. Birds are extra sensitive to electromagnetic fields. In fact, the fact that 5G does something with birds should tell you, hey, we need to pay attention to this because birds are extra sensitive to magnetic fields. That's how they navigate, right? That's how they can move from south to north to south, et cetera, and east to west. That's how they can tell. They have an internal compass that's really sensitive to electromagnetic fields. When a bird gets interrupted, that should be a cue for you to know, this area is probably not that conducive for sleeping, right? I'm not saying don't go there. I'm just saying if you live there and sleep there, that's a red sign.
It's bringing me back to when I was living in, obviously born in Soviet Union and whatnot. There was a city, and it literally had radio locators there, and it was demolished only in 1995, and no one is allowed in that city still because a lot of people around it were just getting ill.
Yeah, yeah, that's in fact, the Soviet Union has the most research on this type of technology, believe it or not. Some of the actual stuff that I've read, it comes directly from Russian sources, Russian scientists, because they were looking into this a long time before the US was looking into this, as far as
Mm,
like weaponizing radio frequencies. Okay. Just think about that. Somebody was looking into weaponizing radio frequencies, and now we actively invite all of these things into your home 24/7. Again, I'm not saying they don't have advantages, or, obviously technology is wonderful. It allows us to do a lot of things. But just like Spider-Man said, right? With great power comes great responsibility. And that's what's lacking in most people's tech use, is the responsibility or even the know-how of like that this is even harming them, right?
mm.
And that's what we'll talk a little bit into this. But one thing that I wanted to mention before we moved into mitigation strategies or things of that is, how does this affect athletes in particular? Okay. Athletes are a unique group when it comes to EMF because they are constantly using their muscle skeleton for everything, right? They're using their muscles, they're using their tendons, their ligaments. Okay. All of those have a large amount of collagen, including your skin, right? Tensegrity, right? Like if you want to move, it's not just about the muscle contracting, it's about the tension that the whole body feels and how you can produce force to the ground and all of that. That is being used by your tendon, ligament, tensegrity system, which is made completely of a piezoelectric compound called collagen. Piezoelectric means that when electricity runs through it, it acts differently when it's de-energized. So in other words, the more force you put through it, because force is an electrical, you produce force through an electrical means. When you contract your quads, that's an electrical signal. So your collagen system senses electrical signals so that it can prepare for the force to be produced, right? Just like, if you get way too strong muscularly too quickly, your tendons are more at risk of
Mm.
being damaged and torn. The reason is because they're not prepared for the force to overcome them. That also happens if you're not taking PEDs and you just happen to, fall and you go to catch yourself. If the tendon ligament structure is not ready to receive that force, it can tear. That is done by electrical signaling. Wi-Fi and all of these things interfere with the tendon and collagen system to be able to anticipate that. What that means is you end up with tendons and ligaments that are more brittle when it comes to just force production. So that's a crucial thing when it comes to athletes.
So that coming to musculoskeletal effects and whatnot, what effects does it have on your memory, short-term memory, long-term memory, ability to stay focused, and things like that?
Yeah. So short-term memory gets affected the most because of the sleep problem. Because sleep is where you form memory recall and all of those types of things. And if it's directly interfering with that, so short-term memory is the first place you're going to start to see like, I just read this yesterday, but I can't remember much, but I know it kind of talks about stuff. You just have a problem recalling stuff because it hasn't been cemented when you went to sleep and stuff like that.
So
It's
in
not
real
so
life, the
much.
way I hear it is, if you are sitting in your living room and reading a book, don't sit near Wi-Fi router.
Yeah. And we'll get into just some really simple, because we're kind of coming down on time, really simple ways to mitigate this. Number one, don't sleep with your Wi-Fi router in your room. And more importantly, what I would suggest for anybody when they sleep, turn your phone on airplane mode and unplug your Wi-Fi router. It's literally that simple. If you want to quantify what kind of risk you have, you can get yourself what's called a broadband radio frequency meter, and that will measure microwatts per meter squared.
So
And the
is there
guideline,
any kind of amount of microwatts you want to avoid at any cost?
yes. So the studies coming out of Canada, because Canada's kind of leading a little bit of the forefront in this when it comes to like laws and stuff like that. Is you want your sleeping area to be less than 50 microwatts per meters squared, if possible, but ideally lower. So, and I kind of put it as 100 microwatts per meter squared and lower, you're probably never really going to notice anything in your blood work. When you start going above 100 microwatts per meter squared, you will eventually notice it. And then once it gets into 1000 and up, you're going to notice it. You're going to notice it in blood work right away, and you're going to notice it in cognitive function right away. So the steps go 100 microwatts per meter squared, and lower is the lower is better, but 100 kind of is the cutoff of like, that's probably okay, but just know that it's there. And anything above 1000 is like, that's probably not good as far as sleeping goes. During the day, I'm not saying that it's okay and that you should sit next to your Wi-Fi router, but during the day, you're going to find it hard in modern cities to have anything less than 1000. It's just not going to be possible. So the real thing that you got to concentrate on is your sleep, because that's the most important with all of these things that we just talked about. If sleep is shot, all the other systems get shot. So
yeah, so don't be obsessed with trying to fix everything, because you have no control over it anyway.
Yeah, the stuff that you have control of is the things that I'm going to talk about. You have a Wi-Fi router, turn it off at night. You have a cell phone, put it on airplane mode at night. The alarm will still work and everything, like if you use it for your alarm, but you won't have the antenna, and it won't be powered up and sending signals. And definitely, if you sleep with this next to your head, that is one of the biggest reasons why it affects your sleep. Most people do. Most people sleep with it right next to their head as their alarm clock. Turn it on airplane mode. You're not doing yourself any favor. I personally don't sleep with it in my room. I keep it out on the kitchen, and I turn it on airplane mode. And I have a timer for like turning on lighting, like for indoor growing plants. And I have my Wi-Fi router plugged into that timer, so that the timer automatically turns my Wi-Fi router at 10 o'clock at night. It turns it off, and at 6 in the morning, it turns it back on. And that way I know that even if I forget to even think about it, which is how it should be, I'm still making sure that at night I'm getting the most restful sleep as possible. Now, you may be, my personal experience now, you may be an unlucky individual that lives next to an airport or lives next to a cell phone tower, which is unfortunate for me, but I do have a cell phone tower next to my house. And that is too much radiation, to the point where I'm literally selling my house for that reason.
So how do you figure out it's too much for you? And what brought it up?
So I bought one of these, right? And then what I did is, in the middle of the night, I turned off my breaker to my house. So in other words, no power in my house. No fridge, no stove, no microwave, no Wi-Fi, everything. I just went to the main power breaker, turned it off, turned off all my cellular phones and stuff like that, and my laptops. So literally no power in the whole house. Took this, and I'm still getting 10,000 microwatts per meter squared in my house, even in my sleeping area. So right away, the how is that getting in my house? It's external, right? And so then you start tracking it down. I'm like, oh well, it's probably, and you walk towards the cell phone tower, and it only goes up and up and up and up and up, and until when you're next to the cell phone tower, it's up to like 4,000 microwatts per meter squared. So yeah, I mean, that is an unfortunate truth living in the modern world, especially with 5G, because 5G towers are very small. They're only the size of like my chest, so they can be put anywhere. So that becomes a problem. And it is something that more and more people are going to start running into in cities. This is not cheap, but if you are displaying these signs and you're already doing some of these things, this can become valuable to troubleshoot. If your environment is too bad, the only real solution is to change your environment. Luckily, we're humans. We can do that, right? That's a thing. But then it comes down to, do you have any other questions or anything?
So if anyone is kind of, hey, this is my house and whatnot, I can't move anytime soon, what can they do to mitigate these kind of negative effects and whatnot? Would going out in a forest once a week or twice a week for a few hours with no phones, no nothing, which I like to do, is beneficial for someone's health?
Well, that would be one of the main things that I would add as a lifestyle weekly thing. Hey, if you live in the city, it is beneficial. Go out into the country, turn off your phone, go for a 3 or 4 hour walk, take a freaking nap. Literally take a
I
nap out.
feel literally completely different person when I do that. I switch my phone off for a day and I just go somewhere and I come back and I'm like, wow, I feel amazing.
Yeah, and that is the power of actual restorative properties of not being inundated with EMF. That's why it can cause irritability and all these other things. It's through secondary mechanisms that have to do with electrical signaling. And when you eliminate it, you actually relieve anxiety, you relieve stress, and you do feel much better. So what you just said is actually a perfect like weekly ritual type of thing. In a daily ritual, the things that I stated before, as far as around sleep, turn off all of that type of stuff. And the other thing that you can do is try to use wired connections. So all your wireless routers, you can, most of them, you can buy the wired version, right? If your laptop has a way to connect an Ethernet cord, do that instead. You won't get away with that with your phone, but if most of your work, which is a lot of people on their computer these days, wire your computer and turn off the cellular or the wireless portion of your Wi-Fi route and just use the wired cable, just like we used to 10 years ago. That alone will eliminate a lot of it, especially if your job involves being connected to the internet. And then another thing that you can be doing is the stuff that we talked about earlier. Sunlight mitigates this. And if you do the sunlight with some grounding, like what you said, you go to a remote place, you don't even have to do it remotely. You like if you have a cement pad outside or a porch, something that's attached to the ground, you can just take your socks off, put your feet on the ground. That alone starts to mitigate some of this because now you're grounded. So any electrical system, this is getting a little bit too much into like how electricity works, but grounding is a way to circumvent the interaction of electrical signals with your body. So grounding, cold exposure, and daylight exposure, all of this.
Everything we talked about before this video is to mitigate this.
Yes, because it improves the biology by doing certain things, and those certain things combat the electrical input from foreign electrical.
So just a final touch, is Bluetooth anywhere near us?
Just about the same. Okay. Just about the same.
So you go outside in the forest and your Wi-Fi, like Bluetooth powered headphones.
Use wired headphones. Use wired headphones. Use wired headphones.
Yep. No, awesome. We could talk about this topic a lot because we just cram in everything in small and concise videos. But as usual, thanks for your time, David.